Yo, what's up? My name's Patrouski, and the PokeMMO Christmas event is around the corner, and that should be enough to get anybody excited in my opinion. Whether you're a new player, a medium level player, or an endgame player, there's going to be something for you to do in PokeMMO during the Christmas event, which most likely, for those that don't know, usually events in PokeMMO drop on the holidays, so we're likely to see that event drop on December 24th, 25th, or 26th. Those are the three most likely dates, and unfortunately, we don't really get a whole lot of information ahead of time. It just kind of happens, and we have to go with the flow as the players. Now today I am here to talk about a specific part of the event and probably the more endgame and more difficult part of the event, but if you are a new or medium level player, you might be able to participate in at least some of it, if not all of it, if you take the time to prepare now, and that's what today's video is all about. We are, of course, talking about the upcoming Christmas raids in PokeMMO, and in my opinion, the Christmas raids are far more difficult than the Halloween ones on average. I would say around 50% harder. And you also have to factor in that it's always possible that all of these raids could change. We never know what events will be until they drop. However, I do feel really comfortable with this event, saying there's about a 90 to 95% chance, just based off of vibes and my historical, guesstimates, that all of these raids will stay the same, possibly with some minor balancing tweaks. The reason I feel that way is because we've seen the same Halloween raids now return 2 years in a row. I would be really shocked if we saw that treatment for the Halloween raids and then not the upcoming Xmas raids. So even though there's a really small chance that these things could change, I vehemently recommend every single player in PokeMMO prepare at least some of these Pokemon ahead of time, because it is so important to prepare ahead of time with events like this, because good IV Pokemon are cheap right now. You could pick up a literal raid-ready Crocodile, 25 plus attack, 25 plus speed, plus some other stats in the defenses, adamant nature, for 42,000 Pokeyen, and it's EV trained and already XP trained up to level 66. There are so many classically powerful raid Pokemon that are extremely cheap right now because the market is a little bit slower heading up until that event season. And then once that event season kicks off, the market usually kicks off with it. These Pokemon most likely won't be as cheap when everyone who didn't prepare is scampering around trying to gather these Pokemon now as fast as possible to be able to do the new limited content. Also, keep in mind to try to get OT versions of these Pokemon whenever possible, meaning that you actually buy the breeders off the GTL, finish the breed up yourself, and then you have to go do all of the EV training and XP training, because certain high-level raids do require a certain amount of OT Pokemon to be able to even attempt them. This really matters with the upcoming Jirachi Raid in the Christmas event, which will 95% most likely return. But I also don't want players to feel like they have to panic and make every single Pokemon OT. That would cost them a lot more time. Around 50% of your Pokemon being OT is a perfect place to go ahead and start, in my opinion, and then trying to prioritize the raid Pokemon that are used on the later level raids and the higher level raids. Now, if you are newer to PokeMMO or newer to raids, this might all sound super overwhelming so far, and that makes a lot of sense. And I just want to tell you, don't worry. This is why I make these preparation videos, so you can make some of these mons or all of these mons and familiarize yourself with all of the mechanics and still have some time ahead of raids actually dropping. So you give yourself some time to process everything, as well as have some time, be a step ahead of the content itself. When the event drops, we'll all just be taking it one raid at a time, because usually only one raid releases every single day. If you ever get overwhelmed, you can pause at each raid Pokemon, go make whatever Pokemon you might need to complete that raid, learn the mechanics, pause the video, go make those mons, come back to the video, go to the next one, and it's kind of rinse and repeat, or even come back to this video when the event actually drops and check on the mechanics and the details you might need to know before the fight. Now, I do want to go ahead and give two quick shoutouts. One over to Cav, who is an incredibly underrated PokeMMO content creator who makes, in my opinion, the best PokeMMO raid guides when the events are actually here, as well as the PokeMMO Raid Den Discord. Links for both of these sources will be linked in the description. This video would not have been possible without those two amazing resources. But let's go ahead and jump into the individual raid for raid breakdown. First things first, the first raid in the Christmas event as of last year was a Glaceon raid. We led this Pokemon with 3 fire Pokemon and 3 fighting Pokemon. We would set up Sun with a Ninetales lead, and then have things like Darmanitan, Gallade, Blaziken, Typhlosion, and Charizard in the back. What's really nice here is the 3 fighting type Pokemon often double as fire type Pokemon if that's needed. So for example, Darmanitan, Gallade, and my Blaziken are the 3 fighting type Pokemon, even though Blaziken and Darmanitan can also do fire damage. This raid had a mechanic where it becomes resistant to fire damage after the first half of the fight, so you end up using your 3 fire Pokemon for the start of the fight and then your 3 fighting Pokemon in the back. If you're looking for specific builds for any of these Pokemon, like the Ninetales, Darmanitan, Gallade, Blaziken, whatever it may be, I do have an extremely in-depth video on my channel called How to Build Every Single Raid Pokemon in PokeMMO, which goes over EV spreads, movesets, the IVs, everything you may possibly need. That will also be linked in the description, but if you ever have any questions for something, go ahead, let me know in the comments. I will respond to you as soon as possible on how to build your Pokemon. We have a few more extra details here, like making sure you do have at least one fighting type move on your Darmanitan. Usually Superpower is the pick, so it can do both types of damage if need be. And a fun fact, you don't need to set up Tailwind for this fight, so no Murkrow is necessary because you can just go ahead and outspeed. Glaceon's a very slow Pokemon. Other than that, it's a pretty decently simple fight as long as you know what you're getting into ahead of time. That's a lot of these raids, is if you know how the mechanics work before you do the fight, you can just counteract it and, you know, plan ahead, and it's going to save you so much time and so much potentially wasted Pokeyen. Next up, raid number 2 is Raichu. The team that I used for this raid was Krookodile, Sableye, Garchomp, Murkrow, Golurk, and Mamoswine. Now, for this Raichu raid, you need one person to throw off a gravity move at around 75% HP because it will start to levitate and float, dodging all of your big earthquake damage, which is how we kill this raid. Usually, you use a Sableye or an Alakazam. I think I was the gravity Pokemon here with my Sableye in the second slot. And then you want around 4 to 5 just big earthquake ground type damage dealers. It's really important with things like looking for an earthquake user. You want it to also be a ground type because it does get stab, which is same type attack bonus, which is going to boost that earthquake damage by 50%. And you do also lead a Tailwind Murkrow for this fight, and then also have a backup Tailwind Murkrow. Since Tailwind lasts around 4 turns, you might need to set one up on turn 5 for some of these raids. And it is worth noting that you can have a Tyranitar on your team here and set up Sand if your team is all coordinated, which they should be. Being able to boost your special defense by 50% against this Raichu can keep some of your Pokemon alive and can be helpful in getting off the damage that you need. Next up, raid number 3 is going to be Stantler. Now, it's very important you Brick Break on turn 1 to break the screens that it sets up. The team we used for this is Blaziken, Gallade, Metachan, Primeape, Poliwrath, and Mienshao. These teams are not the end-all be-all. You can variate a little bit on these if you don't have some of these Pokemon. Just make sure you have powerful fighting types or some sort of Pokemon that emulates what that other mon is doing, whether to a lesser or even greater degree at times. Now, Stantler does have a mechanic where it reverses the special and physical attacks. It inverts the type of damage that Pokemon is doing, meaning that a close combat would actually come from your special attack stat, and then Focus Blast would be a physical move, if that makes sense. But this Pokemon is so frail and you should do so much damage, it doesn't even really matter if you play around this mechanic. Last year, I was able to beat this Pokemon without even playing around this or factoring in that mechanic at all. I believe I went from doing 5% damage with a close combat on my delayed or something like that to 4% damage after the inversion. So you're still doing plenty of damage. And then it's also really important. This is very simple and basic, obviously, but you're just spamming fighting type moves against this Pokemon. Things like close combat, superpower, and high jump kick if you really want to risk it, but I do not recommend high jump kick. Just because, if you don't know, high jump kick is 90% accurate. Even though superpower lowers your stats, you're most likely going to die after you throw off an attack against most of these raids. They are really just DPS checks and DPS and mechanic battles. So that minus attack and minus defense stat is not going to matter after your Pokemon dies and you bring in your next one. But I think that covers Stantler. Next up, let's cover the next one at raid number 4, going to be Chimecho. This was a pretty tanky, pretty decently difficult raid. You led with Haze Murkrow, I believe Weavile. Yeah, Weavile with some sort of dark type attack, so like a Night Slash. Crawdaunt, similar situation, a Night Slash Pokemon. Assurance Krookodile or Crunch Krookodile is really good. Sucker Punch or Assurance Shiftry. And then Scizor with like Bug Bite or even U-Turn. You do need to haze turn 1 with that Murkrow. You also need to heal block against this Pokemon. This team does not have a heal block Pokemon, but you do need to heal block against this Pokemon at around 75% HP. And as you can see, we're at raid 4 and we've already ran into, I believe, 2 different Pokemon that need a heal block mon. So you might not have needed a heal block Pokemon for the Halloween raids. I vehemently recommend building a heal block Pokemon for the Christmas ones. There's a lot of Pokemon that can do that. Things like Gothitelle, things like people like Smeargle. You want it to be fast. The biggest thing is you want it to be speedy and throw off that move. And then after that, you want some dark and bug type attackers like all the examples I listed here, and then a Streens Sableye to make yourself a bit tankier. Since Chimecho doesn't actually hit that hard, you can survive like 2 different times on your Pokemon and then get off more damage. Can be nice. But that is the Chimecho raid. On to raid number 5. We have a pretty simple fire type raid. We have Ninetales, Darmanitan, Charizard, Typhlosion, Murkrow, and Volcarona. This is your pretty standard fire type raid team. It's probably the most popular raid team you'll see by far. Raid number 5 is Sawsbuck, and you do need to lead Ninetales here, of course, to set up your sun. And you actually want to throw off an Incinerate on turn 2. That is very important to be able to burn up the barrier, burn up the item that he does have access to, and then you just click sun damage. You just click Flamethrower, under sun, pretty simple from there. Next up, raid number 6 is the Beartic raid. This is another sun fight, but you potentially might want a Torkoal over your Ninetales here. If you don't have a Torkoal, like I believe I didn't have one, I think Ninetales can work, but you might have to test it. Torkoal being a bit slower is relevant because whoever's the slowest Pokemon in the fight sets the weather. So if the opponent is also trying to set up hail, for example, or snow, as it's called now in PokeMMO, your Pokemon, your Torkoal, your Sunsetter being slower is really important to get off the weather last. This was a pretty simple fire type raid. Beyond that, we did use a Tailwind Murkrow lead. We used a Sunsetter. We have a backup Sunsetter, which is also my Ninetales here because they try to change the weather at some point in the fight. Then you also need a backup Murkrow to throw off a Haze because he will Omni boost himself at around 40% HP. The team used for me was mostly just a lot of sun damage: Moltres, Darmanitan, Ninetales, Charizard, Typhlosion, and Entei. Next up, raid number 7, which is going to be the Clefable raid. Probably the easiest raid of the entire event. This is a direct quote from Cav that I thought explained this fight perfectly. Just spam fighting, easy peasy. Do not haze, do not reflect, just do damage. I think Cav said it best. Just throw off your delayed, close combats, your sharp, what's the sharpness attacks, the sacred swords, the Blaziken close combats, the Darmanitan superpowers, the Mienshao close combats, the Medicham is really good damage with pure power ability, and then your Primeape with CC. That's raid number 7, probably the easiest of the bunch. And then next up is raid number 8, maybe the most difficult of the bunch. This one took me multiple attempts. This raid actually took me 7 attempts last year, but it did end up getting nerfed after I was able to defeat it. So sometimes if these raids are extremely hard, the devs will actually kind of adjust them or bring them more in line, but you can't delay things too much to where you're hoping for that because it is decently rare. Maybe rather uncommon is the better word. But raid number 8 is Tangrowth. I ended up using my team of Charizard, Moltres, Murkrow, Volcarona, Cloyster, and Vanilluxe. And the real problem with this raid is that it just had so much RNG in it. And we'll get to that here in a quick sec. But first things first, if you see a Cherum as the ad Pokemon, you would just reset in this raid. You could not beat Cherum. I don't remember the exact reason, but it was a pain in the butt. You couldn't do it. And that's a good thing with raids is like you can actually just, if you see a Pokemon on the side that's going to make your fight more difficult, you can all just FF the fight. It takes like 2 seconds and then just re-queue back into the fight with your link of teammates. Speaking of link of teammates, I do not recommend solo queuing almost any raid in PokeMMO, especially this raid. I vehemently recommend joining a team or even just getting a group of friends who all have the similar goal of completing raids and all have similar team builds. Yes, you can solo queue for raids in PokeMMO, but it is a nightmare from my personal experience. I do think it's gotten better over the years from what I hear. I might fearmonger it a little bit much, so I don't want to, add to that. So my apologies if that's what I'm doing. But I have heard from other people that, solo queuing's gotten a lot better. The fact that people have had like 2 to 3 years now to build raid teams and that information is a lot more spread, solo queuing might be more viable than I'm letting on. But I'm just still personally not a big fan of it. It's just really inconsistent. If you can meet people, my Discord is a fantastic way to meet other like-minded people who want to take the raids decently seriously and knock it out first or, hopefully the first 3 tries or so. And also just be patient. Please be patient with your fellow gamers and your fellow people during these raids. I always say these raids are pretty difficult. And it's a lot of people who are trying to learn a raid and create the team every single day for the first 14 days or whatever, for the entire event basically on Christmas. There's a new raid that drops. People have to figure out what works for the raid. People have to build the Pokemon if they don't have them, and then they have to actually do the raid and learn the mechanics. So a lot of people, there's just so much happening all at once, and it's around the Christmas time. People, there's a lot going on. Be patient with your fellow man, your fellow gamer, and be kind and charitable if a mistake happens, especially because you're likely to make a mistake. Every single year of raids and every single event, I make at least a handful of mistakes, and I am often the reason my team loses at least one raid, probably once a year. It happens. We all make mistakes. There's a ton going on. Do not be ashamed if you make a mistake. Just be like, hey, my bad. I goofed up, I'll try to be more consistent next time and lock in. And if you're a teammate of that player, say, hey man, no worries. It's not a big deal. We just lost a little bit of time. We just go again. But anyways, back to the Tangrowth raid. The difficult part of this raid is that it throws off ancient powers constantly, and raids get multiple attacks per turn. It's not like, oh yeah, once a turn it has a chance to Omni boost. No. Tangrowth could throw off like 3 to 4 ancient powers per your one attack. So it might be able to get Omni boosted up to +4 very quickly if it's super stupidly lucky, and that can just kind of kill the fight. If it Omni boosts too much too early, it is often best to just reset, unfortunately. Once again, making it a pretty RNG dependent raid, but I think that might be cleared up more after the nerfs last year. Now, we used 2 to 3 fire damage dealing Pokemon, and then 3 Pokemon also, like almost everybody needs a utility Pokemon. I wrote 3 people need at least 1 utility Pokemon. You need a Tailwind Murkrow, a Haze Murkrow, or a Heal Block Pokemon. And I also included this cheat sheet in the bottom left-hand corner. The best way to do this raid, and also shout out to Cav. Cav is the person who creates these cheat sheets, and they make things so simple and so just consistent and succinct. What you want to do is you want to assign everybody a column. So the up and down, not the left, rows and columns, right? You want to assign them a column and say, hey, this is person 1. I will lead with Tailwind. I'll then do fire damage. I'll then heal block. I'll then do Bug and Ice damage. Hey, my name's Bill. Bill is person 2. We got Bob on person 3. And then we got, I don't know, Billie Jean on person 4. I don't know why I'm doing these southern names, but look for everybody assign themselves a column. Know your role. Know what you need to do. And then you have to also be willing to adjust accordingly if something goes awry in one of these raids. We then also had 2 to 3 bug and ice damage dealers because typings invert at around 30% HP on this raid. So you'd have to have, I had Cloyster and Vanilluxe in the back to make sure I was able to throw off some ice damage as well with Blizzard and or Icicle Spear and Skill Link on our Cloyster. This is also nice because you might notice you have to factor in your distribution of items in raids. So for example, if I have 3 special attackers and then, or I guess here I have 1, 2, 3, 4 special attackers and then 1 physical attacker. That's a good thing. You usually want to throw in at least 1 of each because that allows you to use both your choice specs and your choice band. If this Cloyster was replaced with another special ice attacker, it could work. It could be fine, but having this be an ice attacker is really relevant because you can put choice band onto it and utilize all the damage boosts you possibly can and maximize your items. It's also important to note that Volcarona here is both a fire and a bug type damage dealer. It can throw off a stab bug buzz or a flamethrower or a fiery dance. So having mons like this that can slot in and do either thing in the raid depending at what stage of the raid you're at is really important. And it is recommended to use your highest damage dealing items. Speaking of, your choice bands, your choice specs on those bug and ice type Pokemon. It's going to be harder to do that damage, especially because you don't have access to a weather. The hail or snow does not increase the damage the way that sun truly does. And then you also do need someone heal blocking on turn 4. So all 4 people all need, or 3 or 4 people all need a utility. I think there's 1 person. Yeah, column number 4 is the only person who does not need a utility Pokemon here, but everybody else should at least have 1 utility mon. Tangrowth is a tough raid. If you can't beat it, just keep trying, keep going over and over and over again. PokeMMO is very much a game all about just endurance and never giving up. If you really don't see an option where you're going to be able to win, you might want to reach out to Cav or the Raid Den or my Discord and see if you could get someone to help you out or see what's going wrong. But next up, raid number 9. Raid number 9 is Vanilluxe. We have Ninetales, Darmanitan, Murkrow, Charizard, Cloyster once again, and then Moltres. In the Vanilluxe raid, we have 2 different people lead Murkrow. One of them uses Tailwind and one uses Defog, both on turn 1. We then have a Ninetales person lead with Sun as well, who just throws off whatever damage they can. And then you go ahead and have 2 backup Murkrows. You can actually see once again the cheat sheet down here. You have 2 backup Murkrows who on turn 5 will once again throw off a Tailwind and a Haze this time over a Defog. Once again, I know this may seem super overwhelming, but keep in mind, you only need to be one of these columns. I think this looks super overwhelming because there's 4 different players' actions here. You only need to do one of these columns. So just, take it step by step and make sure you coordinate with your teammates. But this is a decently easy fight as long as you have your Murkrows. Everything else is really just damage. And as you can see, it's fire type damage for the entire raid until the very last turn. Everybody wants to use ice damage. I'm assuming because there is some sort of type inversion here, but I honestly don't remember. I feel like it's the only reason why you would want that. Next up, raid number 10 is going to be Togekiss. Togekiss, you want a Tailwind lead Pokemon, your Cloyster lead for everybody else, and even the person who leads Tailwind will end up going into Cloyster on turn 2. It's funny how good Cloyster is against these Xmas raids. That was not a mon you would see a ton during the Halloween raids. A good example of how things change and how different raids can be between different events. But then we also see some electric Pokemon pop up in this team with Murkrow, Magnezone, Zapdos, Raichu, and Ampharos filling up the rest of our team. This is a rain-centric raid. So you want to lead Cloyster first, then you want to set up Rain on turn 2. Someone is going to have a Pelipper. That is our rain setter of choice in PokeMMO by far. And then you want to spam Thunder. Not Thunderbolts, not Discharge, Thunder. Thunder is really good against raids. It's really important to set up Rain. When you set up Rain, it increases Thunder's accuracy to 100%. That is super important. So as long as the weather up, you can all just spam the huge damage boost Thunder. And you once again do need a heal block Pokemon on turn 3. The cheat sheet can be found in the bottom left hand corner, and you're also going to need a backup Tailwind Pokemon on turn 5. Next up, let's go to Raid 11, a decently difficult one, but this one was actually so difficult last year that it ended up getting nerfed. So hopefully it should be a fair bit easier. For this raid, you have to do a big mix of slow and fast attackers, and we'll get into why here in a quick sec, but the team that I used was Crocodile, Shiftry, Bayonet, which is a really weird one. You wouldn't normally see Bayonet, but it was a slow, ghost type sort of, ghost and dark type attacker that I could use for this raid, as well as Chandelure, Tyranitar once again. Tyranitar, Scizor, and I believe Bayonet being my slow attackers, and then Chandelure, Shiftry with Sucker Punch, and Crocodile being my faster attackers. And you need really specific numbers for this raid, which is also like the scariest or toughest part of it. And I even recommend naming your Pokemon, nicknaming your Mons, the speed which they are at level 80. Now, this is easily the most technical raid, and it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of new players out there are very stressed and very confused. I was extremely stressed heading into this raid for the very first time, but I want to show you guys really quick. If you don't know how to check a Pokemon's speed at a certain level, you can head over to its summary page like this, head over to its stat page right here, and then go click this blue little recycle type icon, and you can see as I do this, it's going to change its level theoretically, and I can do it to level 80 and see that this Typhlosion would have 240 speed at level 80. We had to do this for every single one of our raid Pokemon for this fight and see the magic number of 208, or at least over 208. So you would need Pokemon with 209, above 208. You would need 2 fast Pokemon, aka 2 Pokemon with above 209 speed, or 209 or above. Once again, at level 80, if you have them at level 100, it's not going to give you an accurate reading because they will be scaled down for the raid. Then you also need 2 slow Pokemon, which is at 208 speed or lower at level 80. And you can see I wrote here, this fight is so complicated to explain that it's better just to give you a list of the raid Pokemon that could potentially be used for the fight, and then we coordinate and deal damage when the fight actually releases. So this might be a much better fight to just kind of wait and see what happens, but as long as you build a variety of speed Pokemon, a variety of Pokemon, you can actually see on the left, in the left over this little box over here, I did leave a list. This is from Cav's document as well, a list of examples of fast Pokemon, things like Crocodile, Hydreigon, anything with Sucker Punch. I love Shiftry with Sucker Punch, Volcarona, Chandelure, and then some slower examples are things like T-Tar, Scizor, Skuntank, Honchkrow with Sucker Punch, or Honchkrow with Assurance. So we wouldn't want to Sucker Punch if it's counted as a slow mon, to be fair. Or once again, I use like Bayonet here, for example. But that's all I can say on raid number 11 for the time being. Let's just go ahead and move on to raid number 12. And that's right, there are 12. There's more than 12. Most likely going to be 14 to 15 raids for this Christmas event, which is like almost double the amount of raids compared to Halloween. Next up is Moxie Salemence. This thing gets very powerful very quickly, and you are never going to survive against it. So your best bet is just to do as much damage as possible. You really want to lead here. This fight's very important to lead at least one person. One person needs to lead with a Magic Bounce Xatu, also with Tailwind. The reason you want to lead Magic Bounce Xatu is because this fight starts with a roar. It's not a move that Salemence uses. It's kind of like an opening mechanic that the game gets to kind of cheat on. Salemence opens by roaring. So if you all lead your Murkrow Pokemon trying to set off a Tailwind, or if you all, you don't guaranteed get that Tailwind off. You could do this fight without Xatu. If you only have Murkrows and don't have time or don't want to build a Magic Bounce, which is hidden ability access, by the way, which is kind of, expensive and difficult to get. If you can't get a Xatu for some reason, you can just keep doing the fight, like resetting, doing the fight over and over and over again until the Salemence happens to randomly switch in your Murkrow. But that is like a 1 in 5 chance or so. So to keep it consistent, I severely recommend someone leading with a Magic Bounce Xatu with Tailwind. That Magic Bounce is going to prevent that roar from hitting your Xatu, allowing you to guaranteed lead with Xatu and get off a Tailwind. One other person is also going to want a Mental Herb Murkrow in the back with Tailwind, because it's going to need to get through a permanent taunt that also is a raid specific mechanic that happens later in the fight. If you are the person with that Tailwind Murkrow in the back, like I was here, you actually do want to lead with your Murkrow, because when the Salemence roars you, it's guaranteed that Murkrow will get switched out for a different Pokemon. If I were to have led with my Vanilluxe here, for example, there is a chance that he roars in my Murkrow and then kills it, so I can't set up the Tailwind later in the fight. That may sound confusing, but keep in mind, it's okay if you lose these raids. Some of these are just going to have to come with, trial and error. And then other than all of this, silly williness, it's really simple. You just throw off ice type attackers, Icicle Spear, Mamoswine. You can even use loaded dice this year, which will actually be a really cool, new item to see. There's some newer items we haven't really had access to in some of these raids yet. So loaded dice, Mamoswine, Choice Band Cloyster, Specs, either Vanilluxe, or you can even go Life Orb or Specs on Starmie. And I just threw in I didn't have enough ice type attackers last year, so I just threw in a Dragon Claw Garchomp. It's not as good because it's only doing 2 times super effective damage, where Salemence is 4 times weak to ice. So ice type attackers are better, but if you only happen to have like a Hydreigon with Draco Meteor or a Garchomp with Dragon Claw to like slot in on one of your slots, it's probably fine. You probably do enough damage, but you definitely want as few teammates doing that as possible. And then next up, you would think that would be it, but no, there is a 13th raid, which this is the raid that you get access to once you beat all the other raids. You can then try your attempt at the Jirachi Raid. And as you can see here, almost nobody beat this raid first try. I feel like it's really important to tell people that so you don't have a false expectation. A lot of these raids might take you multiple attempts. That Tangrowth raid took me 7 attempts, Jirachi, I think, took me 3 or so. And that was pretty lucky. That was actually pretty darn good, if I recall correctly. Now, Jirachi, you want to lead with Sun and Tailwind, and you just do a lot of sacrificial fire damage, but also you want to make sure you can get off a fake Tears attack on turn 3. Important to note that Ninetales does get access to Fake Tears as a TM, so a lot of you guys might already have your Ninetales raid Pokemon built. You can go ahead and throw a Fake Tears TM on that to fulfill that need, while also being able to just use it as a Sunsetter if you need it for that, or as a just fire damage dealer if you need it for that. So it's very multi-purpose. The team that I used was Murkrow with Tailwind lead, Entei, Darmanitan, Charizard, Torkoal, and Golurk. And you wanted to make sure you had at least one slow attacker in the back for Trick Room towards the end of the fight with Jirachi. That's why you see my Torkoal and my Golurk here. I believe the Golurk was either throwing up a big Earthquake. It might have like a shiny Golurk. I forget the exact use of this. I think Golurk was really good at tanking Jirachi's attacks, if I recall, with being a ground ghost type Pokemon. And then it was able to also throw off an Earthquake or a potential Fire Punch with like the Iron Fist ability. But to be honest, I don't remember the exact reason why I used Golurk here. And then next up, we do have the final raid to cover, but this is the least important one in my opinion, because I think there's such a likely chance this won't return. It's kind of 50-50. I do put here almost certainly won't return. After a little bit more research, I don't know if this is fully correct, so I do want to qualify that. Suicune's a weird one. The Alpha Suicune raid is an Alpha Suicune raid, for example. The Alpha Suicune raid just dropped out of the blue. Nobody expected it. We had so many raids last year for Christmas. Nobody thought it was going to happen, and it just happened, and a lot of people weren't prepared. This is a tough one because it's also such specific Pokemon. Most of these Mons that are used for the Alpha Suicune raid aren't used for other raids in the game. So this is a very like will they, won't they, 50-50, like up to you type situation. Alpha Suicune is a pretty demanded and pretty cool Pokemon in PokeMMO. And the developers have kind of gone, like I've seen them talk, it's tough to tell. They've talked as if it won't return, but also it could, and they don't seem to really know, from my understanding, of what they want to do with this kind of this raid slot exactly. I think it's very likely we do see something in this slot, whether Alpha Suicune returns, or whether we see like an Alpha Entei or an Alpha Raichu raid or some other Alpha Legendary. The devs said last year when this came out that this was really just them testing mechanics and testing what they could do with raids and trying to, like, it's like almost like a beta test for the future. Well, let's get into the actual Pokemon. I did go ahead and post like the poker paste for this, which once again comes from Cav, if I recall correctly. We see a Covert, Cloak, Calm, and Careful Nature Blissey. IVs, you need 29 plus in HP and Special Defense. And then for the EVs, you want 252 HP and SPDEF. And for the moves, you want Captivate, Copycat, Soft Boil, and Toxic. Then you want a Ferrothorn with Eject Button. Very specific Pokemon. Eject Button Ferrothorn. Calm, Careful Nature. 29 plus HP and SPDEF. 252 HP and SPDEF EVs. And then Ingrain, Bullet Seed, and Leech Seed. These are egg moves. At least Leech Seed is. Ingrain might also be. So make sure to breed the egg moves you need on this Ferrothorn. Bronzong is a light clay using Pokemon with Calm or Careful Nature, 29 plus HP and SPDEF, 252 HP and SPDEF EVs, Trick Room, and Light Screen, once again light clay as the item. And then you have your Jinx, one of the more important Mons in this raid. It was not really replaceable from what I saw. Jinx with Dry Skin and Steel Swap. This was really important because Jinx was able to just tank like almost every single attack that the Suicune would throw off. Now, it is nice that you only need 4 Pokemon to do this raid. They are just 4 very specific Pokemon that aren't very reusable in other activities. All right, but that is all the raid details I wanted to cover, and I wanted to leave you guys with a full list that I compiled of every single Pokemon used in these raids and also alternative options. I also sorted them by what are physical attackers, special attackers, and utility Pokemon to help you guys know what stats you might need and how to EV train them. So for example, most physical attackers are going to want 25 plus physical attack, 25 plus speed, and the most special attackers are going to be 25 plus special attack, 25 plus speed, and then you usually want a plus damage nature in raids. So for physical attackers, you want adamant, lonely, or naughty. For special attackers, you want modest, mild, or rash. And then utility mons usually want some sort of bulk and some sort of defensive stats. So like Murkrow, I usually end up going like bold, 2v2 HP, 2v2 defense, but you can even go like a shitty Murkrow. And don't worry too much about utility mons because a lot of times they're actually just meant to die. But let's go ahead and go down through the quick list really just quickly. First things first, for physical attackers, we have Darmanitan, we have Gallade. Make sure to get the sharpness ability on it. I wanted to go ahead and put in any extra details in parentheses to the side of it. Blaziken, which can also be a mixed attacker. Crocodile, Garchomp. Make sure you get hidden ability access on your Garchomp because then it can also be used in PvP and other PvM activities and just have maximum effectiveness. Rough Skin is so much better than Sandvale. Golurk, Mamoswine, Medicham, Primeape / Hitmonlee. Primeape is used majority in the Halloween event. You see it against Darkrai Raid, for example, but Hitmonlee is not really in my teams here because I don't think I had one. Hitmonlee is better damage. Reckless Hitmonlee is so freaking powerful. Poliwrath, Mienshao, Weavile, Crawdaunt, Shiftry, Scizor, Entei, Cloyster, Tyranitar, and then Banette, but you could also replace that with Skuntank. Next, we have our special attackers, which include hidden ability access Ninetales, that is crucial. A Typhlosion with Eruption, Charizard with hidden ability access, that is crucial. Volcarona, Moltres, Vanilluxe, Magnezone, Zapdos, Raichu, Ampharos / Plusle and Minun. I include all of those Pokemon because those are most of the plus and minus Pokemon for raids. And for those who don't know, for electric type attackers in PokeMMO, the plus and minus abilities are really, really good in raids. And I believe it is, yes, Ampharos is hidden ability, so you do need a hidden ability access Ampharos if you want to utilize Ampharos in that way. The plus ability, not normally a very powerful ability in typical Pokemon, but in raids it's very, very powerful because it says ups the special attack if another Pokemon has plus or minus on the battlefield. I believe it boosts it by like 50%, and from my understanding it stacks based on how many people also have the plus or minus ability on the field. So if you have all 4 of your teammates using a Ampharos or a Plusle or a Minun or a Mon with this ability, they get a massive boost to their damage, and it actually makes them very, very, like, it's funny to see, but it's true. Plusle and Minun are meta raid Pokemon in PokeMMO, as well as I think Manectric is one of the other Pokemon that can get the plus ability, if I'm not mistaken. I don't see it here listed. Let's go see if we can find it on the GTL. Yes, that's kind of a sneaky one and a rare one, as you can see. Look how few Manectrics exist. So Manectric, yes, it can be a plus Pokemon or a minus Mon. It's not even in the Pokedex. That's so weird. One of those little, extra little, I guess, insider details in Pokemon you just get from playing the game for so many years. But they're so expensive. So I don't expect people to build these. This is so interesting. These are from, I guess, a previous Mysterious Cherish Ball from 2025. How peculiar. But then to finish off the list, you also have Chandelure, Starmie, and Torkoal. And then for your utility Pokemon, you have access to Murkrow with Prankster, Sableye with Prankster, and then you could even argue Ninetales is like more of a utility mon than a DPS mon. And then for a fast heal block Pokemon, there are so few Pokemon that learn heal block in PokeMMO. I could really only find Smeargle, and then Gothitelle with Choice Scarf is one of the more common. I think this is the most common heal block mon you see. If you have any other options, let me know in the comments. Or if I missed any other details you think that are really important to mention in this video, let me know in the comments. The beautiful part of our current atmosphere in PokeMMO is that everybody is working together to get these raids and get these sources and these things cracked in the game, and that's just a beautiful thing in my opinion. We've never been more cooperative when it comes to just cracking and completing content. But I believe that is everything. If you found this video helpful, please leave a like on it to let me know. This took quite a while to make, a lot of research and a lot of all the presentations and the Google slide and all that. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like on it. Subscribe to me for daily PokeMMO videos and tons of upcoming Christmas prep guides. I plan to do a general guide as well as a clip together edited video of all the fights from last year if you want to see visually what these fights looked like. My Discord is linked down below if you want to join a really cool community of people who just love PokeMMO. If you want to go above and beyond and support my content, allow big guides like this to be possible. YouTube memberships, Twitch Primes, Twitch subs, and PayPal and Venmo donations are greatly appreciated and allow me to make this style of content especially. But I believe that is it for me. I will see you guys later, but for now, peace, Reno. Yo, what's up? Outro Patrouski here. I wanted to take this second to say thank you so much for watching the entire video. It is thanks to people like you I'm able to make the content that I do, as well as everybody whose name is listed here. That's it for me. Have a fantastic day.